28 years old, and I still felt that flutter of excitement every birthday morning. This year felt different though, like maybe all those years of putting my family first were finally going to pay off. I had been thinking about the mortgage payments, the utility bills, the grocery money that disappeared from my account every month like clockwork. But today was my day. Right. Today they would remember that I was not just the person who kept their lights on and their bellies full. I was their daughter, their sister, someone who deserved celebration. As I drove toward my childhood home in Phoenix, I pictured Mom handing me a card with that warm smile I remembered from my teenage years. Before I dive into the birthday card that changed everything, where are you watching from today? If you have ever felt taken for granted by the people you love, most hit that like button right now. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories about standing up for yourself when your back is against the wall. Trust me, you are going to want to follow this journey to the very end. I grew up in a modest ranch house on the outskirts of Phoenix, Arizona, where the desert heat made everything feel slower and heavier. Dad Frank used to work as a mechanic at Johnson's Auto Repair downtown, coming home every evening with grease under his fingernails and stories about the cars he had brought back to life. Mom Linda worked part-time at a hair salon called Glamour Cuts, doing perms and highlights for the neighborhood ladies who trusted her with their Saturday transformations. My older brother Tyler was already married to Sarah by the time I graduated college, and they had given my parents two beautiful grandchildren who were the absolute center of their universe. Everything shifted in March of 2018 when Dad threw out his backlifting and engine block. The doctors said the herniated discs would never fully heal, which meant no more heavy lifting, no more crawling under cars, no more mechanic work. Suddenly, the steady paycheck that had supported our family for 2 decades vanished overnight. Mom tried to pick up more hours at the salon, but even working full-time, she was only bringing in about $1,500 a month. The house payment alone was $1,800. I had just turned 22 and was working my first real job as a junior accountant at Peterson and Associates. My starting salary was decent for someone fresh out of Arizona State University, especially considering I had graduated debt-free thanks to academic scholarships. When Dad called me that April evening, his voice breaking as he explained they might lose the house, I did not hesitate. Family takes care of family, right? I started with the rent covering the $300 gap every month. It felt good to be needed to be the solution to their problem, but 300 became 500 when the air conditioning unit died that summer. 500 became 800 when Mom needed dental work that insurance would not cover. By the time COVID hit in 2020, I was paying their entire mortgage plus utilities plus a grocery allowance plus Dad's physical therapy copays. Tyler always had an excuse ready when money conversations came up. I have got a wife and kids to think about, he would say, as if his responsibilities somehow trumped mine. You understand, right, Nat? You will get there someday. The numbers were stark when I calculated them on my laptop that November evening before my birthday. Over the past 6 years, I had contributed $127,000 to my family's survival. My own savings account had exactly $4,000 in it, and I was still renting a studio apartment because I could not afford anything bigger. Meanwhile, Tyler and Sarah had bought a 4-bedroom house in Scottsdale with a swimming pool and a 3-car garage. November 15th arrived with the kind of crisp autumn morning that made Phoenix almost bearable. I woke up expecting phone calls, maybe some flowers delivered to my office, perhaps even a surprise lunch invitation. Instead, silence. 10 o'clock came and went without a single happy birthday text. By noon, I was refreshing my phone constantly, wondering if there was some network issue preventing messages from coming through. Tyler posted 3 Instagram stories that day about his lunch, his workout, and his daughter's soccer practice, but not one mention of his sister's birthday. At 2 o'clock, I drove to the grocery store and bought myself a small chocolate birthday cake from the bakery section. The woman at the counter asked if I wanted her to write anything special on it, and I almost started crying right there, between the fluorescent lights and the artificial flowers. Just, "Happy birthday" is fine, I managed to say, wondering how I had become the kind of person who bought her own birthday cake. I arrived at my parents' house around 4 in the afternoon, cake box in hand, and hope still flickering in my chest. Tyler's SUV was in the driveway next to Dad's old pickup truck, which meant the whole family was there. Perfect timing, I thought. Maybe they had been planning something after all. I used my key to let myself in, calling out a cheerful hello as I entered the living room, where everyone was gathered around the television watching some home renovation show. Oh, hey, Natalia, Tyler said without looking away from the screen. Did not hear you come in? Sarah waved from the couch where she was braiding their 6-year-old daughter's hair. Their 4-year-old son was playing with toy trucks on the carpet, making engine noises that filled the comfortable silence. Mom was in her recliner with a crossword puzzle book, and Dad was stretched out in his usual spot with his heating pad pressed against his lower back. Nobody mentioned my birthday. Not one person acknowledged the date or asked about my day or commented on the cake box I was obviously carrying. I stood there for a full 5 minutes listening to Tyler debate the merits of granite countertops versus quartz before I finally spoke up. So, anything special about today? I asked, trying to keep my voice light and casual. Mom looked up from her crossword with a blank expression. Special, what do you mean? It is November 15th, I said, feeling heat creep up my neck. Oh! Mom's face suddenly shifted into something that might have been embarrassment or might have been annoyance. Right, I almost forgot, wait here. She disappeared down the hallway toward her bedroom, leaving me standing in the middle of the living room like an uninvited guest. Tyler glanced at me for the first time since I had arrived, and I caught something in his expression that made my stomach clench. It was not guilt or apology, it was amusement. Mom's been working on something special for you? He said with a grin that did not reach his eyes. Mom returned carrying a standard birthday card, the kind you could buy at any drugstore for $2.99. The front had generic pastel flowers and silver lettering that said, "Another year older," in curly script. She held it out to me with an expression I had never seen before, something cold and almost businesslike. Here, she said. Do not expect much, though. You still have not earned it. My fingers trembled slightly as I took the card from her hands. The words she had just spoken echoed in my ears, but I tried to convince myself I had misunderstood. Earned what? Earned a birthday card from my own mother? I opened it slowly, hoping to find some kind of heartfelt message that would make sense of her strange comment. Instead, I found handwriting I had known since childhood, Mom's careful cursive spelling out words that hit me like a physical blow. Happy birthday to the family leech. Maybe this year you will grow up. I read it twice then, 3 times, certain I was missing some kind of inside joke or reference that would make it funny instead of cruel. But there was nothing else written inside, no explanation or softening follow-up. Just those 2 sentences in blue ink, each letter carefully formed, with the same precision Mom used when writing grocery lists or birthday cards for her grandchildren. Tyler burst out laughing before I could even process what I had read. Oh man, Mom really went there, he said, slapping his knee like he had just heard the funniest punchline in the world. Family leech. That is perfect. From his spot on the couch, Dad chimed in without even looking at me. We should have cut you off years ago, he said matter-of-factly, as if he was commenting on the weather or the football scores. Most parents would have done it by now. Sarah was trying to hide her smile behind her hand, but I could see her shoulders shaking with suppressed laughter. Their children sensed the adult amusement and started giggling too, even though they clearly had no idea what was happening. The sound of their innocent laughter mixing with the cruel words felt like being stabbed with a rusty knife. I stood there holding the card, my brain struggling to make sense of this alternate reality where I was somehow the problem. What does this even mean? I asked, my voice smaller than I intended. Cut me off from what? Mom settled back into her recliner, with the satisfied expression of someone who had just delivered important news. You live in that fancy apartment while we struggle here, she said, gesturing around the living room, like we were sitting in some kind of refugee camp instead of the house I had been paying for. Fancy apartment, I repeated, incredulously. I live in a 400-square-foot studio, and I pay $1,500 of your $1,800 mortgage every single month. Dad finally looked at me, his expression more annoyed than anything else. We never asked you to do that, he said, with a dismissive wave of his hand. Yes, you did. The words came out louder than I intended, causing Tyler's youngest to look up from his toys with wide eyes. Dad, when you could not work anymore, you called me crying because you were afraid you would lose the house. Tyler shifted on the couch to face me fully, his amusement fading into something more serious. Do not be dramatic, Nat, he said in the condescending tone he had used on me since we were kids. They are just saying you should be more independent, like a normal adult. Independent. I could feel my heart rate climbing as the absurdity of the situation crashed over me. I pay your utilities, I pay for your groceries, I paid for Dad's physical therapy and Mom's dental work and the new water heater last summer. That is what family does, Mom said calmly, as if she was explaining basic math to a child. But you act like we owe you something for it. Tyler nodded in agreement. Plus, you make good money. It is not like you are struggling or anything. Sarah, apparently feeling like this was the perfect moment to join the conversation, looked up from her daughter's braid with a sympathetic smile. Maybe if you found a boyfriend, you would not be so bitter about money, she suggested helpfully. I mean, at your age, most women are focused on building relationships, not keeping track of every dollar. The room went completely silent except for the television where some couple was debating paint colors for their dream kitchen. I looked around at these people I had loved and supported and sacrificed for trying to find some trace of the family I remembered. But all I saw were strangers wearing familiar faces, strangers who had somehow convinced themselves that I was the selfish one in this equation. Mom broke the silence with another observation that felt like a slap. Tyler has real responsibilities, she said, gesturing toward the grandchildren who were now completely absorbed in their toys again. A wife, kids, a mortgage. You just have yourself. Dad nodded sagely, as if Mom had just shared some profound wisdom. At your age, most girls are married with families of their own. What do you even do with your money? Most girls. I repeated, focusing on the phrase that stung almost as much as being called a leech. I am 28, not 18. And what do I do with my money? I give it to you. Tyler jumped back into the conversation with the confidence of someone who had clearly been thinking about this topic for a while. Remember when I was your age, I already had my first kid and was making mortgage payments on my own place. With help from Mom and Dad for the down payment, I pointed out, remembering the $10,000 loan that had never been repaid or even mentioned again. That was different, Mom said quickly. That was an investment in his future, his family's future. I tried one more time to make them understand the reality of my situation. I have turned down 3 different job opportunities in other cities because I did not want to leave you guys without support. I have not taken a real vacation in 4 years because I could not afford it after paying your bills. I have not been able to save for a house down payment because every extra dollar goes to keeping you afloat. No one asked you to sacrifice, Mom replied with a shrug that made my chest tight with rage. That was your choice. Dad leaned forward in his chair, fixing me with the stern look he used to give me when I was in trouble as a teenager. Maybe if you did not spend so much money on unnecessary things like that fancy gym membership, he began. It is $25 a month, I interrupted, and I need it for my mental health. Tyler threw his hands up in mock exasperation. See, always making excuses, always playing the victim. The conversation continued, spiraling into territory I had never imagined possible. Tyler seemed to be enjoying himself more with each passing minute, as if years of resentment were finally bubbling to the surface in the most twisted way possible. Honestly, Nat, he said, leaning back on the couch with the relaxed posture of someone who was just getting started, maybe it is time you learn some tough love. You have been coddled your whole life. Mom nodded enthusiastically, apparently thrilled that someone was finally speaking her truth. We have been too soft on you, enabling your dependence instead of forcing you to grow up. Dad adjusted his heating pad and chimed in with his own contribution to this bizarre intervention. Other parents charge their adult children rent when they move back home. We have been too generous, letting you think family support goes one way. I felt something shift in my brain, like a switch being flipped, or a dam finally cracking under pressure. They had completely rewritten history. In their version of events, I was not the daughter who had stepped up during their crisis. I was not the sister who had sacrificed her own financial security to keep their world stable. I was a leech, a dependent, someone who had been taking advantage of their generosity for years. Tyler was warming up to his subject now, gesturing with his hands like he was delivering a PowerPoint presentation. I mean, look at this objectively, he continued. You are almost 30, single, living alone in a tiny apartment. Instead of focusing on building your own life, getting married, having kids like normal people your age, you are hovering around us like you need constant validation. Sarah nodded along with her husband's analysis, apparently forgetting that she had been completely silent during family gatherings, until this moment when it was convenient to pile on. It is like you never learned how to be independent, she added helpfully. Mom was practically glowing with satisfaction as she watched her children discuss my numerous character flaws. Instead of investing in your future, you spend all your emotional energy on us, she said. It is not healthy, Natalia. Dad delivered what he clearly thought was the most devastating blow of all. Maybe the problem is not money. Maybe it is your attitude. That was it. That was the moment when something inside me snapped completely. I pulled my phone out of my purse and opened my banking app, while they continued their psychological dissection of my life choices. My fingers moved across the screen with mechanical precision as I navigated to the automatic payment section. "What are you doing on your phone?" Tyler asked, apparently offended that I was not giving their intervention my full attention. "We are trying to have a serious conversation here." "Just checking something," I said calmly, not looking up from the screen. "Please continue explaining how terrible I am." I found the recurring payment for their mortgage, $1,500, scheduled to process on the 27th of every month. I clicked Cancel Automatic Payment and watched the confirmation message appear. Next was the utility bundle, electric, water, and gas combined for about $350 monthly. Another click, another cancellation. "The least you could do is look at us when we are talking," Dad said, his voice getting sharper with irritation. "This is exactly the kind of disrespect we are talking about," Mom added, shaking her head like a disappointed teacher. I moved on to the family cell phone plan that saved them about $200 a month compared to individual plans. Then the streaming services, Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus for the grandkids. Each cancellation felt like removing a weight from my shoulders, even as my family continued their lecture about my shortcomings. Tyler had apparently decided that my phone use was the perfect example of everything wrong with my character. "Are you even listening to us?" he demanded. "This is why you cannot maintain relationships. You do not know how to be present." "Oh, I am listening to everything," I said, finally looking up from my phone with what I hoped was a pleasant smile. "Please continue telling me how I am a leech, while I subsidize your entire existence." I opened our family group chat, the thread labeled Family Updates, that included all four of us. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard as I considered exactly how to phrase what would be my final message in this conversation. Around me, the intervention continued. "Your attitude right now is exactly why we had to be honest with you," Mom said, apparently convinced that their brutal assessment was some kind of gift to my personal development. Tyler was nodding along like a bobblehead. "We are trying to help you see how your behavior affects other people." I started typing, taking my time to craft each word carefully. The rest of the family seemed to sense that something significant was happening, because their voices gradually faded into background noise. Even the grandchildren had stopped playing with their toys and were watching the adults with the kind of intense curiosity that kids display when they know something important is happening but cannot quite understand what. Dad made one final attempt to regain control of the narrative. "If you would just listen instead of sulking, you might learn something about yourself." I finished typing, read over my message once to make sure it conveyed exactly what I wanted to say, and then hit send. The familiar whoosh sound seemed to echo in the suddenly quiet living room as my phone delivered the message that would change everything. Without another word, I stood up from the couch where I had been perched awkwardly throughout this entire nightmare. I walked toward the front door, leaving my untouched birthday cake on the coffee table, like evidence of the celebration that never happened. "Where are you going?" Tyler called after me, his voice tinged with the first note of uncertainty I had heard all afternoon. "We are not done talking." I turned back to face them one final time, my hand already on the doorknob. "Actually, we are done," I said calmly. "Check your phones." Mom was fumbling for her phone with the kind of panicked urgency usually reserved for medical emergencies. "Do not be so dramatic about this," she said, but her voice lacked the confidence it had carried just moments before. "Dramatic," I repeated, savoring the irony. "Linda, your mortgage payment is due on the 27th. That is 12 days from now. Frank, you have physical therapy tomorrow morning at 10:30. That appointment costs $90. Tyler, you might want to start figuring out how you are going to help them, since I will not be." I walked out the door and closed it firmly behind me, cutting off the sound of their voices calling my name with increasing desperation. For the first time in 6 years, I felt like I could breathe properly. The drive back to my apartment passed in a strange haze of relief and adrenaline. I kept my phone turned off, savoring the silence and the absence of notification sounds that had controlled my life for so long. When I finally got home and powered it back on the screen, lit up with 47 missed calls and 23 text messages, all from various combinations of the family members I had just left behind. The messages told a story of rapidly escalating panic. The first few were indignant, as if I was a misbehaving child who needed to be brought back into line. Tyler had written, "Nat, what did you do? The bank says all the auto payments are canceled. This is not funny." Mom's initial response was pure outrage. "This is so childish. Get back here right now and fix this mess." Dad had tried the authoritative approach. "You cannot just leave us hanging like this. We are family." But as the hours passed and I did not respond, the tone shifted dramatically. By 8 o'clock that evening, Tyler's messages had become desperate. "Mom is crying. Dad is having chest pains from the stress. Is this really what you wanted to hurt people who love you?" I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my tiny balcony overlooking the parking lot of my very unfancy apartment complex. The November air was finally cool enough to be pleasant, and I watched the sunset over the desert mountains while I composed my response. "What I wanted was respect on my birthday," I typed back. "What I got was called a family leech by people who have not paid their own bills in 6 years. Actions have consequences." The reply came back within seconds. "You are being ridiculous. It was just a joke. Can you not take a joke?" I turned my phone off again and went to bed early, sleeping better than I had in months. The next morning brought a new wave of communication attempts. But I was prepared now. I had blocked Mom and Tyler's phone numbers, though Dad kept calling from different numbers at his physical therapy clinic and Tyler's work. When Dad finally got through around noon, his voice was a mixture of panic and anger. "Your mother has not slept all night," he said without any greeting or preamble. "She is worried sick about the bills." Then perhaps she should not have called her daughter a leech on her birthday. I replied calmly, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. "Can you not take a joke?" Dad asked, echoing Tyler's defense from the night before. "It was just a card. You're acting like we committed some kind of crime." $96,000 is not a joke, Frank," I said, using his first name instead of calling him Dad. "That is what I have spent keeping you afloat since you hurt your back." "Nobody asked you to keep track," he shot back. "Nobody asked me to pay either, but you sure were happy to cash the checks." I hung up and went back to work feeling more focused and productive than I had been in years. My coworkers at the accounting firm noticed the change immediately. Jessica, who sat in the cubicle next to mine, cornered me during lunch break. "You seem different," she said, studying my face with the intensity of someone trying to solve a puzzle. "Good different. What happened?" I gave her the abbreviated version of the birthday card incident and its aftermath. Jessica listened with growing amazement, occasionally asking clarifying questions like, "Wait, you paid their mortgage, and for how many years?" When I finished, she sat back in her chair and whistled softly. "Girl, it is about time," she said. "I have been wondering for 3 years why you never had any money despite making a decent salary. I thought you had some kind of secret gambling problem." That afternoon, Tyler showed up at my apartment building. I watched from my third-floor window as he paced back and forth in the parking lot, apparently trying to work up the courage to come inside. When he finally approached the building, he started pressing my buzzer repeatedly, holding it down for long stretches that made an obnoxious honking sound echo through the hallways. I did not answer. Instead, I ordered Thai food from my favorite restaurant, opened a bottle of wine, and settled in for a Netflix marathon. Every few minutes, the buzzer would sound again, but I had learned to tune out the noise of other people's emergencies. By day 3, the family had apparently decided that more drastic measures were required. Tyler arrived with Sarah and both children in tow, clearly hoping that the presence of innocent grandchildren would soften my resolve. When the buzzer rang this time, I could hear multiple voices calling my name through the intercom. "Aunt Nat," came the sweet voice of Tyler's 6-year-old daughter. "Why will you not visit Grandma and Grandpa anymore? They are really sad." I felt a pang of guilt at the genuine confusion in her voice, but I also recognized the manipulation tactic for what it was. I pressed the intercom button and spoke directly to Tyler. "Using your children as emotional weapons is exactly why you do not deserve my help," I said. "Explain to your kids that sometimes adults need to have important conversations about respect and responsibility." "You are tearing this family apart," Sarah's voice crackled through the cheap speaker system. "I am not tearing anything apart," I replied. "I am just not holding it together anymore." Over the following weeks, the attempts to contact me became less frequent, but more creative. Mom started calling my office directly, which resulted in an uncomfortable conversation with my supervisor about personal calls during work hours. Tyler tried to ambush me at the grocery store, following me through the produce section while delivering a lecture about forgiveness and Christian values that would have been hilarious if it were not so pathetic. Dad even recruited my elderly Aunt Patricia, Mom's sister, to call and guilt me about abandoning family during the holiday season. Your mother is heartbroken. Aunt Patricia said during our 15-minute phone conversation, she does not understand why you are being so cruel. Did she tell you what she wrote in my birthday card? I asked. There was a long pause. Well, no, but I am sure it was not meant to hurt you. I read her the exact words from the card which I had kept as evidence of my family's true feelings. Another long pause followed. Oh, Aunt Patricia said quietly. I see. Well, perhaps there are two sides to this story after all. That was the last guilt trip phone call I received. By December, I had settled into a new routine that felt like stepping out of a fog I had not even realized was surrounding me. My bank account, freed from the monthly drain of other people's expenses, began to grow in a way that felt almost magical. I opened a savings account specifically for a house down payment and watched the numbers climb week by week. I started dating again, accepting invitations I had been turning down for years because I could not afford dinner and drinks after paying everyone else's bills. I took a weekend trip to San Diego, just because I wanted to see the ocean. I bought new clothes that fit properly instead of wearing the same 5 outfits I had been rotating for 3 years. The guilt came in waves, especially during quiet moments when I remembered good times with my family birthday parties from my childhood Christmas mornings, when Tyler and I were actually friends. But then I would remember the look on his face when he called me a leech, the satisfaction in Mom's voice when she delivered her cruel birthday message, the casual way Dad had suggested they should have cut me off years ago. Those memories were like a vaccine against weakness, strengthening my resolve every time I felt tempted to reach out and make peace. In January, exactly 2 months after the birthday card incident, I received a text from a number I did not recognize. It turned out to be Sarah Tyler's wife writing from a new phone. Hey, Nat, the message read. I know things got heated, but Tyler and I have been talking. We want to apologize for how everything went down. Maybe we can all sit down and work something out. The kids miss you. I stared at the message for a long time before responding. What exactly are you apologizing for? I wrote back. For the misunderstanding, came the reply. For letting things get so out of hand. What misunderstanding? I pressed. Either you think I am a family leech who needs to grow up, or you do not. Which is it? The response took almost an hour to come through. We just miss having you around. Family is important. I deleted the conversation without responding. Family was important, but respect was more important. And I had finally learned the difference between the two. 3 months later, I signed a lease on a beautiful one-bedroom apartment with a real kitchen and a balcony that overlooked the mountains instead of a parking lot. 6 months after that, I got promoted to senior accountant with a salary increase that made my previous financial struggles seem like ancient history. I still live in Phoenix, still drive past my childhood neighborhood sometimes on the way to work. Occasionally, I wonder how they managed to solve their money problems, whether Tyler finally stepped up or whether they downsized to something more affordable. But I do not wonder enough to break the silence that has become my sanctuary. The last time I saw any of them was at the grocery store about a year later. Mom was in the checkout line ahead of me, and for a moment our eyes met across the space between us. She looked older, more tired than I remembered, and there was something in her expression that might have been regret. But then she looked away without speaking, paid for her groceries, and walked out of the store like I was just another stranger. And maybe that was the truest thing about our relationship after all. I have learned that love without respect is not really love at all. It is dependency dressed up in prettier clothes, obligation masquerading as affection. Real love celebrates your birthday with joy, not cruelty. Real family builds each other up instead of tearing each other down when they think they can get away with it. The birthday card that changed my life sits in my desk drawer, now not as a reminder of pain, but as evidence of my own strength. Sometimes the greatest gift someone can give you is showing you exactly who they really are. And sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself is believing them. What would you have done in my situation? Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and self-respect? Drop a comment below and share your story, because I know I am not the only one who has been here. If this resonated with you, smash that like button and subscribe for more real stories about standing up for yourself. Share this with anyone who needs to hear that they are worth more than being someone else's financial safety net. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that sometimes walking away is not giving up. Sometimes it is finally choosing yourself. Here is to all of us who learn to value ourselves enough to demand better treatment. You deserve respect, especially from the people who claim to love you most.